Hi, I'm Otto Penzler, and they have let me out of the basement to come up to the main floor of the bookshop, hoping that we have better reception uh, on the filming of this. So this is the main floor, and thank you for joining us. It's 10:30 on Wednesday morning now instead of 1 o'clock. For those of you who actually saw the notification of that. But as you know, it also will be seen on Instagram and YouTube, and you can find those pretty easily. Excuse me. So today I want to talk about one of my dearest friends for many, many years, although I will start saying that we did not start off on the best foot. Back in the 1970s, I was writing a book called The Encyclopedia of Mystery and Detection, which wound up winning an Edgar. But one of the things that I did was I would write to every living person in that book to make sure I was getting everything right. And if somebody wasn't alive, then I would find an agent for the estate or a relative just to make sure that everything was as right as it could be. So I wrote the piece about Evan Hunter. Evan was born Salvatore Lambino and incurred a lot of bigotry for Italians, which was not uncommon in America in the 30s and 40s and even into the 50s. And he changed his name, legally changed his name to Evan Hunter. And what I had read and what I knew was that he picked that name because he had gone to Evander Childs High School and Hunter College. So when I sent that to him, I got back a letter saying, "That's not why I picked that name, and if you run that, I will sue you." So I wrote back and I said, "Sorry, but this is what I've been reading everywhere else. How did you pick that name, and I'll fix it." And he said, "None of your business, don't run it or I'll sue you." And I wrote back up, "Well, I'm running it," which I did. He did not sue, but we got off, that's not a great start. And it took about 7 or 8 years. And finally, after I opened the bookshop, I had a customer who said, "Listen, one of my best friends is Evan Hunter, and you guys should know each other because you're so similar." I never sued anybody. But he arranged a meeting for us, and we got over it in a minute. He got over it. I got over it. We were fine, and there was something about that first meeting, and we became great friends. So Evan was writing books under a variety of names, mostly his own. The Evan Hunter name became widely famous because he became a huge bestseller, mainly because of his very first book, his first novel, which was The Blackboard Jungle, which became a terrific film, talked about trouble in schools in New York, juvenile delinquency, and so on. Sidney Poitier's first film, Glenn Ford, and with a great soundtrack of rock and roll, back when rock and roll was just starting. 1, 2, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock rock, Alan Freed, all those people that younger people have no idea what I'm talking about. Anyway, this is a fairly uncommon book now, read to pieces most of the time, but this is a really nice copy. And it was published by Simon & Schuster, who wound up publishing a lot of Evan's books. And Simon & Schuster was really good about doing a couple of things. One is they would show first edition on the copyright page, but they also had another method, and this is where it gets tricky, where they didn't say first edition, but they showed second printing. And I'll show you that later with Ed McBain. So he was writing these novels. He also wrote Strangers When We Meet, which became a very successful film with Kim Novak. And Evan, she became really angry with the screenplay, and she was arguing with the director and arguing with other people on staff, and finally called him. The author of the book for which a movie is being made is usually the last person that anybody pays attention to. but asked him to fly out to the studio, to the set, and help with the script, because she thought her lines were just so awful, and he actually had the opportunity to fix the screenplay, and he and Kim Novak became pretty good friends for a long time. Now, the Evan Hunter books were generally romantic, or they were novels. They were not crime in any way. And Blackboard Jungle is about muggings and beatings and rape and other things, but they weren't designed as mysteries. But he was writing under a variety of names, paperback originals mostly. He was writing as Kurt Cannon, Ezra Hannon, Hunt Collins. He was a very hard-working guy who wrote a lot of books, a lot of paperback originals. Excuse me. And then created something called the 87th Precinct under the name Ed McBain, which is where most people are now familiar with his name. Of course, they became very successful. And his idea was that his hero would not be a single person. It would be the whole precinct. And in each book that he was planning to write, a different character from that precinct would step forward and be the main character. And in the very first book, which was called Cop Hater, his hero, the main figure at that point, was Steve Carella. And at the end of the book, he dies. Very smart editor called and said, no, you can't kill him. This is a fabulous character. And Steve Carella was married to a beautiful redhead who was deaf, which was a very unusual character to have a lot of role in a book at that time. And said, and I read the original version when I reissued that book. Or I didn't read, I take that back. I didn't read the original version, but Evan wrote about the original version. And and I think he quoted from the original version that his editor insisted he change. And it was at night, and it was Christmas, and Carella died. And you would weep because this character was such a great character. Anyway, he prevailed, and he got Evan to have a different ending, and Carella does become the major character in most of the 87th Precinct. They were paperback originals from Pocketbook. The first 7 or 8 were all paperback originals. And I'll show you, actually it says Perma books, but they're basically pocketbooks. This is what they looked like. And these were terrific for bibliographers, because this is what they would do. They would show exactly when on the copyright page, when the book was printed, if there was a second printing, when the second printing was printed, and you could see the whole history of the publication of that book. This happens to be a signed copy, which is, these paperbacks are quite scarce in decent condition, and that's his autograph. This is the whole series had a series look, and this is how they looked, and became tremendously popular. And eventually they found their way into hardcover. Let me just show you the copyright page on this. And this is paperback original, and it shows the copyright page, and provides all the information that, if you're a collector and need to know, there's all the information that you'd need to know. Because of the success of those, he started to be published in hardcover. And this is what they look like. They were Simon & Schuster. Almost all of the early books were published by Simon & Schuster. And they're read to death, and so they printed them on cheap paper, so some of the paper gets a little bit tan, as you can see, because they used very cheap paper. But Simon & Schuster was very clear. It was easy to tell first printings because Simon & Schuster would say first printing. Earlier I showed you some Simon & Schuster books from an earlier time. They would show, like Cornell Woolrich published, Simon & Schuster published Woolrich also. And in the 30s and 40s, they did not say first printing, but they always said second printing, third printing if it was reprinted. If it shows nothing on the copyright page, then it's the first edition. Here's another one, like Love. There's the title page, and there's the copyright page again with first printing. So there's no guesswork involved with Simon & Schuster books. They're pretty easy. And really, I mean, look at these terrific copies. I mean, these are just beautiful for collectors. They're not inexpensive. Most of these books are between $100 and $200 because of the great condition. Yet one more, I'll just show you one more. Again, first printing. And because of the success, they actually wound up Simon & Schuster wound up collecting the early books that were paperback originals, and they put them into hardcover as omnibuses, not for book clubs. I mean, they did go into book clubs also, but they also were published for readers and libraries and so on. And even on the omnibuses, they showed first printing, because it was the first printing the way it was in this format. Because of the great success of the paperback originals, I wound up doing some in an imprint that I had for years called The Armchair Detective Library. And here's one of the early books that was a paperback original, and then I did it in hardcover. And I did 7 or 8 of these, and Evan wrote a new introduction for every book, actually a new afterword, and signed them. These were generally done in printings of about 1,000 copies, but in addition to the edition that you just saw, which is a trade edition, we also did them in limited editions. They look like this, with a slipcase. And these were limited to 100 copies, numbered and signed by McBain. I had the honor to publish his last book, which was this. I published the last 87th Precinct book while he was still alive. And then after he died, I collected all of the early short stories called Learning to Kill, which was a nice way of saying that these were his early works. They had never been collected before in this kind of format. And here's just one example of one of the other names under which he wrote, Hunt Collins. These are very scarce because they were published by a company called Abelard Schumann, which is hardly a major publishing house. And this is the 1950s rather, and there's the copyright page. And I don't know that there was ever a second printing for this book or any book from Abelard Schumann. I think our producer, director, and cameraman scanned the shelves up there. We probably in this store have 50 Ed McBain first editions. And if you're a reader, you will never enjoy anybody more. And if you're a collector, he's a challenge, because there are a lot of books, and the paperback originals are pretty hard to find, and just as the early hardcovers are, because they were done in small quantities and were read to death. People didn't save them. Anyway, Ed McBain, Evan Hunter, Kurt Cannon, Ezra Hannon, John Abbott, and other names. And Otto Penzler. Thank you for watching.
I'll just